This podcast was created as a part of Podcast Lab by India Film Project in association with Anchor by Spotify. Hey everyone, welcome to the Closet Writer Chronicles. I'm your host Sangeeta, aka the Moody Marshmallow. Our guest for today is Rajarajeshwari Mahitha, or better known as Mahitha. She is a trained theatre professional from Drama School Mumbai and the American Conservatory Theatre, San Francisco. She is an actor, writer, storyteller, and a diehard romantic obsessed with Indian mythology. Inspired by the books she's read, and stories from ancient Indian texts she's heard while growing up, she retells these for an audience, young adult and older, presenting the ageless in fresh contemporary ways. She researches, writes and records her stories from home and brings them to her audience online. When asked who her audience is, Mahitha laughs, saying, anyone, anywhere interested in a good story, anyone who believes in the magic of love, and in a good dose of justice, freedom, and equality. As an actor, Mahitha has appeared in Netflix series like Sacred Games and Masaba. Her first love, though, is the stage, and she's been a part of several productions with the Madras Players, CreaShakthi, and other theatre groups in Chennai. I'm so excited to chat with her, and I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi Mahitha, welcome to the Closet Writer Chronicles. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Sangeeta. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So, talking about storytelling, and you've done a bunch of them, I think, over the past couple of years. How did you get into it? And specifically, how did you get into Indian mythology? And when did you decide that this was something you wanted to do and pursue?
Generally, Sangeeta, with anything that I have done up to a couple of years ago, it's always been things that happened to me by chance.
Okay.
I always had this ability that my family would call the ability to add masala to everyday events, to take something small that happened and make a big drama out of it. And anytime I spoke about anything, it would be like, there she goes again, making a big story out of it, making a big drama out of it. And it was always funny. And I don't think anybody ever saw this as a skill that could lead to my becoming a storyteller or anything like that. Absolutely nothing like that. So while I always had the ability to do this, I never had the belief that I could do anything with it. And a couple of years ago, I was in Goa at a writer's workshop. I always like to write. And, at the end of the 3 days, it was our last evening there. There was Fenny flowing freely. And somebody said, come on, open mic time. And all of us took out stories that we had on our phones. And at that time, I happened to have something on my phone called My Mother and I Have a Complicated Relationship. And I read that out. And there were people there who said, wow, why don't you tell stories? We would pay to listen to this. And I looked at them and said, really? You really would pay to listen to me tell stories? And this was when I was about 49 years old, I think. Till then,
Wow.
It never struck me that I could ever tell a story. So I'm not a seasoned storyteller. I'm actually just taking baby steps. Now, when I was growing up, and I grew up in a village, my grandmother would always tell stories. Summertime, there was nothing to do. We were home from the holidays, and we would have the men's quarters in front and the women's quarters at the back, where it was just us women and children. And there was this swing and a courtyard. And hot, sticky summer afternoons, we would be lying down on the swing, and somebody would be fanning us with a circlet of peacock feathers, and my grandmother would tell us stories, or we'd lie down on a jamakalam and there'd be stories. Or some nights we'd go up to the terrace, and there's this thing called Nilachor, when there is a full moon and there's this big drama of food being taken up to the terrace, and
Okay.
an older lady in the family would mix the food for us and tell stories and tell us, all sorts of things from mythology. And my favorite story was about Dhruva. And
Oh, okay.
in fact, that was one of the first stories that I wrote. And also, like many, many, many people, one of the biggest influences in my life as far as reading was concerned was Amar Chitrakatha. That is where my love for mythology actually grew and developed. And also, when you grow up in a boarding school, which is slightly westernized, but you are from a small village in Tamil Nadu,
Hmm.
which is completely cut off from the kind of life that you lead when you're in school, there is this sense of isolation or not quite belonging to either world. And
Okay.
one of the things that we do is, or at least one of the things that I did, was to escape into my head and create stories
Hmm.
into in my head and to escape into books. And I guess that's where it began, this whole journey of being a storyteller, of not belonging. And so I created a world for myself where I could belong, where the stories were mine.
That's that's beautiful. I think you just wove a story right now with that answer, and it was amazing. But I related so much when you spoke about Amar Chitra Katha, because that's something I used to read a lot while growing up. In fact, my grandmother was like, "Okay, if you're not going to listen to me tell you mythology stories, here, take this." I think that was a way of inculcating that habit also of reading into me. But yeah, I completely related to that. And it's just amazing that from where you started and now where you are with storytelling, because it doesn't seem like you're new at it. It really seems like it's in your blood almost. Like you do it so well. It seems so natural, and it seems like you truly were born to do this. Um, and that's just incredible. But having said that, what according to you are characteristics of a good storyteller? What are the elements of a good storyteller according to you? And who are some of your favorite storytellers in India today?
See, one of the characteristics of good storytellers is to be able to observe people, to
Right.
observe things that are happening around them. Because stories are not about big events that happen in our life. Stories are there around us all the time. And people ask me, how can you tell stories about this? Why does it happen only to you? No, it doesn't happen only to me. I lead a very, very ordinary life. It happens to all of us. I see it, and I see it as something that I can take out of my everyday life and shine a light on it.
Right.
Whereas the same thing might happen to you and you might not even notice it. That's the only difference. And I think that's common of all storytellers, where we see things in macro detail and then we add words to it. And like my family used to say, we add masala to it. It happens to all of us. It's there. We all have 1,000 stories in our life. And I love to talk to people wherever I am. And I can speak in Tamil and I can speak in English and I can speak to anybody. And I love to talk to people. So I
Right.
ask them questions, I listen to them, and everybody has stories. And all of these things, little things from something a taxi driver in Bombay said, or a sweeper in Madurai said, comes into stories that I write. And people ask, are they true? How do you get details like this? Of course, they're true. They may not be my truth that happened in my life, but
Right.
there's somebody else's truth. And at that moment, that truth fitted into my story. And that's
Mm.
how we add layers to our story. It's never a flat line. There are so many layers to it.
Yes.
Now, you were asking about the characteristics. Yes, the characteristics, I think the main thing is the ability to observe, to see,
Yes.
and to take
Okay.
that, to do something with it. And then you were asking me who are some of my favorite storytellers in India.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to talk mainly about storytellers who tell stories from mythology.
Mm.
And I would say, of course, everybody knows of Devdutt Patnaik.
Yes.
He's a mesmerizing storyteller, not just a writer. He's a mesmerizing storyteller. And if you've been in a room where he tells stories, it's amazing how the atmosphere becomes charged. And another lady, she's from Chennai, Revati Shankaran. Oh,
Okay.
she's amazing. She is really, really good. And if you go to any temple in South India, very
Right.
often in the month of Margali, you will find people who tell Harikatha.
Oh, okay.
Okay, these are men, women who use folk traditions to tell stories from the Ramayana, the Devi Bhagavatam, the Mahabharata, and it's fascinating. I've always been amazed at how beautifully alive they make these stories happen. And anyone walking by can sit in. There'll be a little mandapam by the side of the temple, and you can sit and listen. Now, coming back to what's accessible to us, there's Geeta Ramanujam. She is very, very well known, both in India and abroad, for her
Yeah.
storytelling. She tells a lot of stories for children, but she also does stories for adults. Then, of course, our own Janaki Shabesh.
Yes. Yeah.
She's a children's storyteller, but you should hear her tell stories for adults. She's amazing. And well, she is not Indian in the sense that she doesn't live here. She lives in London. This lady called Seema Anand.
Yes, I know
She
her. Yeah.
mostly tells stories from, well, she's an expert on the Kama Sutra, but
Mm.
she also is a beautiful storyteller. So
Yes. Yeah.
these are the people who I really admire, and I think they're really good. And there's somebody who I recently found on Instagram. His name is Raman Iyer, and he tells
Okay.
all kinds of stories. And during the lockdown, I think for 400 days without a break, he told stories,
Oh, wow.
different genres, mythology, horror stories, all sorts of things. And he's also a musician who plays the mandolin, and it was fascinating to listen to him. So yeah, these are some of the people whom I enjoy listening to. And
That's,
one day, maybe somebody will put my name in this list.
oh, I'm sure you must be on their lists too, Mahita. Maybe you're not aware of it. I'm sure some of them have you on their lists. I'm quite sure of it. Um, but no, I love that list, and I'm definitely going to go look up the ones I wasn't aware of before this for sure.
Mhm.
But coming back, I guess to a more personal side of things, you come across as someone who really lives life on her own terms, and you really chase after your dreams. And I think that's really inspiring for anyone to see. It's amazing. Having
Mhm.
said that, there's also this expectation society seems to place, especially on women, that by the time you reach a certain age, you should act a certain way, that, you should slow down. You should maybe focus more on family, take things easy. You don't need to be ambitious and whatnot. So, have you ever dealt with any ageist comments or any instances where you've been judged for doing or saying something because it's quote unquote not your age to be doing or saying this? And if you have, how do you deal with it?
Sangeeta, if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have agreed with you. But the world has changed so much. And today, the people who decide what society is going to be shaped like are not the older people, they're the younger people. And a
Definitely.
lot of people don't care how old you are, they don't care who you are,
That's true.
because they are trying to figure their lives out and live their lives out the way they want. And when they look at anybody else, regardless of age, doing that, I think there's a lot of encouragement. And I'm so glad that things are moving this way. 10 years ago, it would have been different. The internet, social media, everybody has a lot of bad things to say about it. But I also think it's a great leveler. Now, there were different aspects to this question that you'd asked me. Have I always chased my dreams? No. I
Okay.
didn't even know how to dream till a few years ago.
Okay.
One day I decided I don't want to live like this anymore. I
Hmm.
don't want to live like my life means nothing.
Right.
And it was a spur of the moment decision to pack my bags and move to Bombay.
Okay.
I am not a brave person. I've never lived in a big city. The biggest city I've lived in is Chennai.
Hmm.
And I've moved on my own. I've not traveled on my own. But I happened to be going through a really, really low personal period at that time.
Okay.
And I called Jehan Manekshaw, who's the head of the school of the Drama School of Mumbai. And
Okay.
I said, I hear you have a 1-year theater program. Do you have space? And if you do, may I join? And by that time, auditions were over.
Okay.
So he said, I will arrange for auditions for you on Zoom or on Skype. There was no Zoom then. And they normally don't arrange for auditions like that. It's all in person. Now things are so different. In a few
Right.
years, the world has changed so much. And he said, but here's the thing. If I get everybody together to audition you, and
Hmm.
if they say yes, you have to take it. At that point, you can't say, oh, I have a life here, I have children here, I have a home here, and you can't
Hmm.
refuse. So he put me in a spot where if he agreed to give me what I wanted, or rather the others in his team agreed, I had to take it.
Right.
And they said, yes. And I had to take it. On
Hmm.
on Tuesday, I think, one week, he said I was in, and on Thursday, I was in Bombay. For
Wow.
25 years, I'd lived in Madras, and in 2 days, I shut my home and I left. Fortunately for me, my son was in college at that time,
Okay.
and no, he was not in college. He was married and he was off living his own life at that time. My daughter was in college,
Okay.
and it was just me on my own. So I closed my home and I told them, it's my turn now. And I left. And my children were very, very supportive. Of course, the rest of my
Hmm.
family didn't understand. When I say rest of my family, I mean my mother, my brother, they didn't understand. But I
Right.
think at the point where what other people said did not matter. A
Right.
voice in my head was so loud saying, don't live with regrets.
Right.
And that's why I took that step. I'd gone so low that I had nowhere lower to go. And
Hmm.
theater and drama, it really gave me a new life. But even then, there was no idea in my mind that I was to do this or to do that. I
Right.
loved, that's why I went to Bombay. I
No.
didn't go with the intention of becoming anything or doing
Hmm.
anything.
Hmm.
And when I finished that 1 year in Bombay, I knew
Right.
that that's what I wanted to be. Why? Simply because I wanted to watch others on stage, not because I wanted to be on stage.
Okay.
And at that point, I got a call from somebody saying, I believe you're an actor. And my first reaction was, who gave you my number? How do you know anything about me? Who gave you my name?
Wow.
Because he was a stage actor in Chennai. In Bombay, nobody knew me. And I loved the anonymity of that, where
Right.
nobody knew me in Bombay. It was a new life.
Hmm.
And the person was, do you have a problem with it? And I said, no, but I want you to tell me who. And they refused. And I said, I'm not a screen actor.
Hmm.
If it's stage, I'll do it. So he laughed and he said, you are an actor, right? So show me you can act. Come and do this audition. And it was a young casting director called Shivam who
Hmm.
was casting for a series called Sacred Games. So I
Okay.
went. I had heard of Sacred Games, but I had not watched it. So I went for it and auditioned. In my mind at that time, I was like, what do I have to lose? If they say no, okay, fine. And I
Hmm.
never faced a camera before. I never faced a camera before.
Okay.
And I got it. So it's like a dream.
Yeah.
And somebody called me and said, okay, Masaba, Masaba. That was just a 1-2 minute role in that, but that happened. So
Hmm.
I've not chased these things, but they've come to me and I've not treated those opportunities lightly.
Right.
I've been grateful for the opportunities. I've taken them and I've used them. Right now, even as we speak, I'm in Sri Lanka
Yes.
and I'm shooting for a web series.
Hmm.
It's a BBC helmed web series. And
Wow.
again, it's a miracle how this happened because I auditioned for it, I got it, and then I said no. I turned it down because I was not sure that I was in the right state of physical health to do it. And
Okay.
everybody was mad. They said, don't turn it down. These opportunities don't come. Don't
Hmm.
turn it. And I went back to the casting agent a few weeks later, actually, I think 2 weeks later, and I said, if it's still open, I'm available. And they
Okay.
said, yeah, we want you. The director wants you. And that honestly is a miracle
Hmm.
because you don't get these chances a second time. It never happens, not to anybody.
Yes,
But you know,
that's
you also have to try.
yes, for sure.
I, I tried the second time. There was no ego. I swallowed my pride and said, I'm sorry, but I am available now. And if you will give it to me, I'll be grateful for it.
Hmm.
Give it to me. So, you know, you don't chase these things. Sometimes they happen. And
Right.
I don't want to chase anything, but I think
Hmm.
good things will continue to happen. I just believe that.
Yes. No, that's beautiful, and I am a huge believer of that too. I think some things you can't really predict it. I guess some things, if they're meant to come to you, they will. No matter how much ever you try to escape it or chase something, what's meant to be will be. And I think it's just amazing that you're getting all these wonderful opportunities and you're truly getting to shine. And I'm so excited, to see all the future projects and work you'll be doing. It's amazing, Mahita, how far you've come and how far you're going to go. I'm so excited for you. I really am. Um,
And Sangeeta, there's no big role or small role. You know, at the end of this, I might be on screen for 30 seconds, but you'd better believe that those are the best 30 seconds that I can ever give, and I'll be giving
Definitely.
that.
No,
And look at the way
definitely.
I wrote. Somebody asked me if I will write a story for a book, and I said, okay. And you also happen to be an author in that same book. And you
Yes,
wrote to me, and I wrote back to you saying hello. And here we are today.
that's so true. That is so
All
true.
I think is just for you to say yes and be open, and the opportunities will come.
That is very true. No, that's very true. And I'm so grateful I got to connect with you also, through that book. And yes, like you said, today we're sitting here and having this conversation, which is amazing. Um,
Mutual. It's mutual.
but coming to now that you're in this zone of going after your dreams and really living life the way you want,
Mhm.
um, I would assume then the lockdown may have been an unnecessary pause or a pause not by choice, because I do remember seeing this video you did for Taper Tale. I think it was called One Night and Two Strangers, uh,
Yeah.
where you spoke about your last night in Bombay, where you had to sort of pack up and go back home temporarily, and you were quite frustrated about that. I'm not going to give any spoilers about the story. Listeners, please do go check it out. It's a beautiful story. But my question is, how was that experience for you to kind of come back home, spend possibly a few months in isolation or at home, and not really going after what you wanted to go after at that point? How did you cope with that?
You know, Sangeeta, it was a blessing. I didn't see it as a blessing. And I'm not saying this as some pseudo motivational thing or just to make it, seem like, oh, bad things happen, but we're going to look at the bright side of it. No,
Right.
it's not at all. See, I didn't even know what a pitch fest was. And July, I took part in one, was selected, and I started being a storyteller in July, August, I think, of 2019.
Okay.
And by the end of the year, I'd already had public performances, I had ticketed performances, I'd performed at Spoken Fest.
Okay.
So it was all going unbelievably well. And I was thinking, okay, I'm the next Shah Rukh Khan. You know, this is going to go really well for me. And suddenly the lockdown happened and everything shut down.
Yeah.
And like I said in that story, it was extremely frustrating. And that conversation with
Hmm.
that person,
Yes.
um, he he was going into hospital the next day for surgery and he didn't know whether he'd survive it.
Right.
And for him to say, this is not the end,
Hmm.
not for you and not for me. There's so much more. And wherever you are, you don't need to be in Bombay. You,
Right.
wherever you are, go after your dream and live your dream. And there was something so raw and so real about the way he said it, because
Hmm.
he was saying it from a position of not knowing whether he would live or die in
Yeah.
the next. And I came back, and it's not as if immediately, I was full of Josh and I said, oh, I'm going to go live my life. It's not
Yeah.
as simple. And I came back and I was paralyzed with not knowing what to do for the next few months.
Right.
Okay. Now, my stories are all taken from life. Now, if
Hmm.
life has stopped happening to you and
Yeah.
to everybody in the world, what do you tell stories about?
True.
And then it so happened that I was part of this Indian aesthetics program in Bombay
Okay.
called Jnana Pravaha. And I love iconography and I love everything about mythology. And somebody had in our group, in the WhatsApp group that we had, somebody put out a picture of the stone panel saying, hey, does anybody know what this is? And I looked at that stone panel and I knew the story behind it immediately. It was a story of Shiva and Parvati playing dice.
Okay.
And so I just hit record on WhatsApp and I narrated a 2-minute story about this. When somebody said, you know what? You should tell stories about mythology and
Hmm.
stories in a way that everybody enjoys and understands. And an idea was born there. Now,
Wow.
mythology, you don't need to live life to get stories from mythology. It's there around
True.
you, everywhere.
Yeah.
And I told myself, okay, now I'm going to tell stories from mythology. So I picked the story of Madhavi.
Okay.
It's heartbreaking story. I picked the story of Madhavi, and I happened to be in my mother's house at that time. And I told the story just as it was in the book. It's very, very disturbing, this
Okay.
particular story. It's
Okay.
about the exploitation of a woman by her
Okay.
father and everybody else around her. And my mother and I
Oh.
sat that evening after I'd finished telling the story and recording it. And she said, why did you do this? Why did you choose this story? And I said, Ma, it's very disturbing. Then she said, but you've not told it as if it's disturbing to you. You've just told it as if it's a story.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
that made me think. And I said, what am I doing? Why do people need to listen to me? They can just pick up a book and read. So
Right.
if I'm going to tell a story, how is it going to be different?
Yeah.
Who am I telling this story, and what of me is in this story? And if I'm not going to put my thoughts and views in the story that I'm going to tell, then let people go to Amachitra Katha, no? Let them go to anything else, no? And read the story. Those will be told in a far better manner than I can ever tell it.
Hmm. True.
So from that moment, I made a promise to myself that I will tell a story only if it has some meaning to me. Now, not all of this has to be about exploitation and sadness and, oh my God, this woman is being, used by everybody. No, no, it's not like
Right.
that.
Hmm.
There are lots of love stories, there are lots of very sexy stories, there are all sorts of things, but
Right.
it has to mean something to me personally, and it has to touch somebody. And
Yeah.
also see, Sangeeta, all our ancient stories have been written by men
That's
through
true.
the eye of men, through their vision of what society should be like, of what a
Hmm.
woman should be like, what a man should be like. Where are the women's voices?
Yeah. That's very true.
What use is our life, our experience, our thinking, our fighting, our everything, if we cannot give voice to all these stories? And
That's
there's
very
so
true.
much to learn from all of it. So, yeah, that's how I became a teller of mythological stories.
Yeah. No, because I completely agree, because this was the next question I was actually getting to, because I know in your the stories about mythology that you tell, you place very strong, feminist perspectives, and you make sure the women characters are portrayed as characters, as human beings with thoughts and opinions and complexity and feelings. Be it, with the story about, I think, Urvashi you told, even in Shiva and Parvati, or and Rukmini Satyabhama, like you really made it a point to give those characters very strong narratives, which you sometimes don't necessarily see in the texts themselves, which I think is incredible. But also, having said that, I know you do slice of life narratives, and there have been a bunch of other videos where you've done and you've spoken about things like, child abuse, sex education, farmer issues. And I was just wondering, have you ever received any kind of hate or negativity for any of the content you've put out till now? Because these can be very, sensitive topics sometimes.
I'll just answer this because
Sure.
it's very
Yeah.
simple.
Sure.
Never.
Okay.
Not even once, not even by one single person have I ever even had a question saying, why did you say this? I've only had gratitude and
That's
appreciation
amazing.
for things that other people had experienced and did not find the voice or the courage to say.
No, that's amazing. No, that's incredible if you haven't, because I do know of certain creators and people who do end up getting a lot of hate. So it's incredible that you haven't got that till now. And because you talk about really important things in those videos, which I mentioned about child abuse, sex education, and whatnot, you talk about very important issues. And it's much needed.
I feel like you've seen a lot of them. Thank you.
I mean, they're very good videos, to be fair. So, I mean, it's only fair that anyone would watch them, Mahita. But no, I mean, so coming to mythology and how you decide to, tell stories, I kind of wondered about this when I was watching your videos. Do you ever stop to think if a story is safe to tell? Because, mythology and religion kind of go hand in hand sometimes. And people can be really fixed about the way they see certain things. So I wonder, do you ever think twice before deciding to tell a story? And have you ever maybe steered away from telling certain stories because of this fear? Or are you just completely, what, let's take it as it comes. I'll just tell the story if it's resonating with me.
See, first of all, I am a staunch Hindu.
Right.
Okay. I make no bones about that.
Hmm.
I was brought up in a Catholic institution, and I probably know, the Hail Mary better than I know any other shlokas.
Hmm.
But I'm a staunch Hindu, and I love my religion.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that I accept everything that is there. And this
Definitely.
is room that Hinduism allows us to question.
Of course.
And it allows us to be believers or non-believers, to
Hmm.
accept it or not accept it, to take a
Hmm.
little part of it or leave everything.
Right.
My religion gives me this freedom. And nobody today can tell me how I should worship.
Right.
So this is something I believe. Now,
Hmm.
having said that, I'm not going to go in here saying I'm going to revolutionize my religion
Yeah.
and I will turn everything on its head.
Yeah.
No, I understand that we're living in times where intolerance is really, really high.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that.
Hmm.
On the other hand, if I choose to speak about something, I'm not going to sanitize that story.
Okay.
So I decided straight away, right from the beginning, is that I will not change the framework of the stories. See,
Okay.
there are a lot of people like
Hmm.
Amish or Anand Neelakantan who change the framework of the stories.
Okay.
They reimagine things and they present it in such beautiful ways. Now,
Right.
I don't have the imagination or the creativity to do that.
Hmm.
So I stick very strictly to the framework. I don't change anything about the framework.
Hmm.
What I do is I make humans of the people who are involved in the stories.
Right.
And I put thoughts in their heads
Hmm.
that could be in anybody's head.
Right.
Now, nobody can tell me that God would not have thought this way or this woman would not have thought that way, because you don't know.
That's true.
Okay. And sometimes when I read a story, some things are very, very obvious to me. And it's almost as if the person who I'm reading about is knocking on the inside of my head saying, hey, look at this and talk about this. So very often when I start writing a story, this sounds crazy, but I'm not in control of the story. I only
Okay.
like the story writes itself.
Okay.
And I would say 90% of the time is spent lying on my back thinking about it.
Hmm.
And suddenly it's there.
Right.
For example, let's take this story of Annapurni. Okay, the one that I talked about, that stone panel
Yeah.
where Shiva and Parvati are playing dice.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you look at the books, if you look at the text, it says that Parvati won everything that Shiva had.
Yeah.
Okay, she won his trident, she won his Rudraksha, she won his the crescent moon, she won his snake, she even won the loin cloth that he was wearing.
Right.
Think about it. Don't we play games like this? Don't we
Hmm.
play poker?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. So put yourself in that situation. These are
Hmm.
the eternal lovers. Okay. They're playing
Hmm.
a game of dice.
Right.
And when one loses, they have to give up an item of clothing, or they have to
Yeah.
give up this, they have to give up. So imagine the erotic tension in this.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's true.
Our gods are not sexless gods.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why can't we have a story that is about two people who are crazy about each other in every way and who are crazy for each other in every way? It doesn't matter if it's Shiva or Parvati or any god or anybody else.
That's true. That is very
No,
true.
because it is there in the text.
Yeah.
You are only choosing not to see it or interpret it in one particular way, while
Hmm.
I choose to interpret it in a different way.
That's
And
true.
Parvati cheats.
Hmm.
Lovers cheat because they want to win. They want to
Yeah.
win the ultimate prize. And they get angry and they fight with each other and they sulk and they walk away. And one person realizes that what he's done is wrong, and
Hmm.
he gets down on his knees and he apologizes and he begs for forgiveness. Does this not happen in all our lives?
Yeah,
So
for
why can
sure.
this not happen to a god or a goddess? The people who we think are the greatest lovers of all.
Yeah, very true.
Look at it like that. You just have to interpret it the way you want to interpret it.
Hmm.
I'm going to quickly take you through some stories of mine.
For sure.
We like, just like we looked at Annapurni. I've written a story on Dhruva. This is very close to me because my grandmother's told me the story. Okay.
Yeah.
And I wrote the story during the time of the CAB protests,
Okay.
where children were out on the streets demanding justice.
Yeah.
And the story of Dhruva.
Hmm.
Um, his mother is the older queen, and he's got a stepmother and a younger brother. And of course, there are these, you're not important kind of things that happen between the two brothers. And Dhruva goes out into the forest,
Hmm.
and Narada meets him and says, "What are you doing here?" And I put these words in Dhruva's head, the very words that the students were asking of the government. I
Okay.
said, why is it that a king can't love his children equally? Why are different values placed on women, on people? And why is a person who does this seen as a good king? And tell me why you value one person for the goodness and wisdom, but because she's different and her home may be different, or her food and her language is different, or her God is different, she is less than somebody else. Why am I less than my brother? And Narada has no answer. And you look at it, these are the questions that the students were asking.
Yeah.
Now, Narada goes and asks, the king, why are you doing this? It's your responsibility to rule wisely. Now, I'm not saying anything obviously,
Yeah.
but if you want to read a parallel into real life, you can see it. And
True.
this is what I want to do. I want to make these stories relevant to today.
Makes
There
sense.
is another story of Shanta. Shanta is the older sister of Rama. And her story is not found in the Valmiki Ramayana, but in folklore.
Okay.
And I wrote this at a time of personal conflict. It's about patriarchy,
Okay.
where she's taken away by her parents. And she's married to Rishishringa, who has the ability to do something called the Putra Kameshti Yagya, where
Okay.
he does these pujas where sons are born to the people who do these pujas.
Okay.
So she goes with her husband to Ayodhya because Dasharatha doesn't have children and he wants sons. And can you
Okay.
imagine what would be going through her mind?
Mm.
And I have these words in her mouth where she says, she tells her husband, a father is one who loves and protects and provides for his child, not one who's contributed his seed. And a mother is one who loves and nurtures and stands by her child, not one who has merely carried the unborn in her womb.
Mm.
And she asks her husband, she says, see how fates have played with us, how I'm here with you, helping you perform this for my parents, so the gods will grant them sons because I, a girl, was not enough for them. And he says, I promise you this, it may not happen in your lifetime or mine, but one day in this land of ours, a daughter will be as important to her parents as a son is. Now you tell me this is not relevant to us today.
Yeah.
It's relevant in the time of the Ramayana. Is it not relevant to us?
Very much. Very much.
Subhadra. Arjuna wants to marry Subhadra.
Mm.
Krishna wants to marry Subhadra. Because come on, it's a beautiful alliance. And the two kingdoms will be strong. But does anybody ask Subhadra what she wants?
No,
So
no.
in this story, I've put these words in Subhadra's mouth where she asks her brother, did you ask me what I wanted? Did I'm already engaged to marry Duryodhana.
Yeah.
Did you ask me if I want to marry Arjuna? And Krishna says, but I've seen you smiling at him and walking with him in the night in the garden. Are you telling me that you don't want him? And she says, so what if I smiled at him? So what if I walked with him at night in the garden? He's our guest. I'm looking after my guest. Just because I smile at somebody doesn't mean I want to be married to that person.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so Krishna says, okay, now tell me what you want. And she says, all I want is for you to ask me what I want.
Yeah.
Let me have the choice to decide. Could this not have happened then?
Yeah. True.
She does ride away with Arjuna in the chariot, but could this conversation not have happened?
Of course
And
it
does
could
this
have. Yeah.
happen today that somebody says, oh, you smiled at that boy, you like that boy? Really? I said, oh, how
Yeah.
does that mean anything at all?
Hmm.
And the story of Parijatam that you talked about, Rukmani and Satyabhama. Look at these stories, Sangeeta. We are talking about Rukmani, who is Mahalakshmi. And we're talking about Satyabhama, who's Bhudevi. These are goddesses. And we're talking about them as if they are petty women who fight with each other to be one greater than the other.
Yeah, that's
What are
true.
we doing? Who are these men who have written these stories? Which is why I say Satyabhama tells Krishna, it is a way of man to talk and to pit one woman against the other. And we who should know better sometimes succumb.
Yeah.
We should, if we really believe that these are our gods and goddesses, we should treat them with a little more reverence, really.
Hmm.
This is like some daytime TV serial. No, our gods and goddesses are better than that.
Yeah.
And there's this other story of Savitri. We always think Sati Savitri, these are these quiet, oppressed women
Yeah.
who, oh, there's nobody bigger than in this world than my husband. Really? Look at Savitri. She was so accomplished that no man dared to marry her. So her father said, go out and find your own. And for 1 year, she went and looked and she couldn't find anybody. And one night when she was returning home, she sees this woodcutter and goes and tells her father, that's the man I want to marry. So what happens? Could it not be that she saw him and was overcome with desire for this man who maybe treated her as an equal?
Yeah.
Imagine for a princess to be treated like, oh, you are far better than I am, to suddenly find a man who treats her as an equal. Don't you think that's an amazing thing?
Definitely.
And maybe in that 1 year, they found love.
Yeah.
Maybe they found her. Maybe he taught her to be more than a princess, to be somebody who was worthy as a woman in her own right. Why could this story not be rooted in love and desire and all of those emotions? Why
Yeah.
does it only have to be like, oh, devotion to your parents, I will always press your feet, I will run after the god of death to get you. And these are the stories that I want to tell people. You know, I had an editor, a 22-year-old boy, Anirudh, in Bombay. He was my
Yeah.
first editor. And he told me, I don't like mythology. But after I started editing your stories, I started enjoying them.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
to me, that's the best thing anybody could have said.
Yeah.
Because these are stories that anybody should. When we watch Avengers and we watch all sorts of adventure movies that are unbelievable. Come on, why not from our own mythology?
That's
They
true.
are stories. You choose to treat them as sacred stories, they're sacred stories. You choose to treat them as good stories, they're good stories.
Yeah.
It's just the way you do it.
No, I completely agree.
Love it. I absolutely love what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm really fortunate to finally have found something that I want to always, always do.
Yeah. No, it's very evident that you do love what you do, because I think the amount of joy that you, Mahita, I'm not kidding when I say this, but you glow when you tell stories. It's so evident. That's why I said it's like you were born to do this, um, which is why, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to even talk to you today, because you're just amazing at what you do. And it's so incredible to be sitting here and hearing you speak about your story. Really, it is more power to you.
You're very kind and very generous, but thank you. Thank you so
No,
much.
I really mean it. I really do. It's my absolute pleasure to be doing this with you. Um, but now that we're sort of coming now to the end of our interview, we end with these two questions usually on the show. The first one is, what are your aspirations? What are you looking forward to in the near or even distant future?
That's a hard one because I don't chase things, but I grasp opportunities, but I don't chase things. But looking at it from today, I think I want to continue doing things that have meaning, that make me happy, and add some sort of hope, some sort of hope. Yes, that's the only thing to somebody else's life. That's what I want to always be doing. And I'm not saying this again in a preachy way.
Right.
You'd be surprised, Sangeeta, at how many women write to me and say, please don't stop doing this because we feel like your characters are saying the words that we want to say.
Yeah.
And I'm really privileged to be in a position where I can give somebody's feelings words. And I want to always be able to do that.
No, that's beautiful. And I agree, because even when I hear a story, one of your stories, like the one about Subhadra or the one again, Rukmini Satyabhama, because you truly have a way of humanizing those characters. And even the story with Urvashi, like I mentioned, she's not just a damsel in distress in that story. You've given her her own opinions and thoughts and feelings, which I think is just beautiful. So it's amazing for sure. Um, and final question, what is a piece of advice or learning you'd like to share with people? It can be creative, professional, or something you've just experienced in your life. What do you think people should know more about?
See, I would say whatever you do it because it has meaning for you and brings you joy. And
Right.
I know not all of us have the luxury of going away from home or giving up our breadwinning jobs to find this joy and this meaning. But we need to do what brings us the money and use that to do what brings us joy.
Right.
Because really, there's a point in living a life where you look back and say, I wish I had done this or I wish I had done that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, live your life as is best for you and
Hmm.
let others live life as it's best for them, not as you think it should be, whoever
Right.
that person is.
Hmm.
Honestly, the universe has enough and more space for all of us to coexist very happily.
Yeah. That's very true. And on that beautiful note, we have now come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for doing this, Mahita. It's been so amazing talking to you. It's been such a pleasure. I had so much fun. I think I learned so much about life and about mythology from this session. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sangeeta. It was as much fun, if not more. Bye.
Bye. So that was my conversation with Mahita. I really did learn a lot and absolutely loved recording this. I would definitely urge you to go check out her wonderful stories. And you can even find the completed ones from the excerpts she spoke about. I hope this festive season brings you joy, prosperity, and peace. Talk to you after a short break. Don't worry, it's just for a week. I'll see you soon with a new guest and a new chronicle to share. Talk soon.